I'm Sandrine Dixon de Clèves, and I'm the co-president of the Club of Rome. Welcome to this incredible session of the Nature for Life Hub on pathways towards a nature-positive future. Almost 50 years ago, a group of economists and scientists from the Club of Rome commissioned a publication called The Limits to Growth. The study clearly predicted that if we have population growth and ever-increasing resource consumption, the risks would be existential to humanity. That it was possible that humanity could face an uninhabitable planet. We already knew 50 years ago where our trajectory was headed. We knew we'd be faced with a planetary emergency, and here we are today. There can be no doubt that we are in the midst of a deep planetary emergency, a nature crisis, a climate crisis, and an inequality crisis. From the devastation we see on the news with our very eyes to the quiet devastation of a species disappearing or an ecosystem collapsing, we know that we are facing a code red for people and the planet. And the only way forward is to ensure that we shift our economic and financial systems to value people, planet, and prosperity together. Throughout each of the previous sessions of the Hub, we've heard inspiring stories from around the world on the steps we need to take for a decade of hope and transformation. These stories show us the many different pathways for responding to our planetary emergency and ensuring that we emerge from the emergency more resilient to future shocks and crises. In this session, we've put together a set of 10 pathways of hope and transformation towards a nature-positive future. The list is not exhaustive, but it shows us that there are steps that all of us can take right now. I'll kick off with the first pathway, charting a planetary response to our planetary crisis. One of the most essential steps that we must all take, governments, businesses, communities, all faiths, financial institutions together, is to chart a course to respond to our planetary crisis. We must each take stock of how this crisis affects us and how we're affecting the crisis. Are we contributing to biodiversity loss and climate change, or are we actually part of the solution? And if we're not part of the solution, what steps can we take to change course? The Club of Rome, in partnership with the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, wrote a short guide called the Planetary Emergency Plan, Securing a New Deal for People, Nature, and Climate. In this plan, we identified key commitments and transformations needed for a just, nature-positive, and low-carbon future. From a nature-positive perspective, these included setting a universal global moratorium on deforestation, increasing ecosystem protection globally, halting the conversion of wetlands, grasslands, and savannas, shifting incentives to promote regenerative agriculture and sustainable forestry, and radically increasing investment in nature. We also identified essential economic, social, and legal transformations that must occur within the next 5 years, including the pulling out of fossil energy, but also securing the rights of Indigenous people, forest and tribal communities to their lands and territories, and developing national and sectoral roadmaps for all countries towards regenerative land use and green, inclusive, circular economies. Throughout the Nature for Life Hub, we've seen how different sectors around the world are already charting a planetary response to our planetary crisis. We've seen how countries are working with spatial data on nature to create their own map of hope. We've seen how winners of the Equator Prize are redefining prosperity by creating new models of governance and are rewiring economic norms and policies by pricing carbon, favoring microenterprises, and some even going further and putting in place well-being indicators, moving far beyond GDP or growth indicators. We've seen how corporations, investors, and farmers are rapidly pivoting to regenerative practices and are putting communities at the heart of sustainable production. And we've seen bold new commitments on protection and restoration from the world's governments and philanthropists. This gives us a reason for hope. It's time for all of us to chart a planetary response to our planetary crisis. We must all be part of the solution to emerge from this emergency together. We cannot wait another 50 years. We cannot wait another decade or another publication of the limits to growth. It is time to act for a nature-positive future today. The second pathway is increasing ambition on restoring nature. 1 out of every 5 hectares of land is already degraded. Restoring these lands will yield enormous benefits for people and for the planet. Restoring tropical and temperate forests, revitalizing abandoned agricultural lands, and restoring degraded peatlands could sequester up to 175 gigatons of CO2 equivalent over the next 30 years. And together, these 3 actions would provide trillions of dollars in benefits, mostly for local communities who depend most on the nature for their livelihoods, including access to food. Let's hear a national perspective on why restoration is such an important goal for countries, and how restoration can help in achieving national development goals. To kick off this session, it gives me great privilege to introduce Her Excellency, the President of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, President Zale Work Zewde.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank my good friend Akim Steiner for inviting me to this meeting. Recently, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change revealed that human activities are estimated to have caused approximately 1 degree Celsius of global warming above pre-industrial levels. The report warns that the global warming is likely to reach 1.5 degrees Celsius between 2030 and 2052 if it continues to increase at the current rate. The latest report by the Secretariat of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change on efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is not encouraging either. As the climate emergency deepens, some communities and regions of the world will be increasingly more vulnerable to weather and climate extremes than others. The intensity and frequency of the impacts over people and nature in developing countries in particular, including my own country, Ethiopia, will be severe. Ethiopia is particularly vulnerable to extreme weather events such as droughts and floods. With more than 80% of 110 million people dependent on agriculture for livelihoods, including a large population of pastoralists, climate change and biodiversity are at the heart of Ethiopia's policies and strategies. Nature-based solutions are a fundamental part of protecting our climate and biodiversity. Studies indicate that nature-based solutions can provide over 1/3 of the cost-effective climate mitigation needed between now and 2030 to stabilize global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, achieving nature's mitigation potential. Adequate investment in nature-based solutions can help reduce losses of climate change, biodiversity, contributing to the creation of new jobs and poverty reduction. My government continues to exert efforts to build resilience and adapt better to climate change by harnessing such solutions. We have been implementing an ambitious climate-resilient green economy strategy since 2011. A national adaptation plan has also been rolled out with 18 adaptation options in the most vulnerable sectors. And most recently, we have launched a climate-sensitive 10-year development plan which runs through 2030. Last July, we submitted an updated nationally determined contribution to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Moreover, our third round Green Legacy Initiative was concluded recently after another successful planting season. We are well on track to plant 20 billion seedlings by 2022. We are all in a struggle we are fighting for our common survival. And the time to act is now. Let me reiterate the United Nations Secretary General's words. We are at an inflection point. We still have the choice of making the right decision. I truly hope leaders from around the world, whether in the public or private arena, will decide to save our planet by acting now. The time for delay has long passed. Now is the time for action. I thank you.
Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I join you at the closing session of this great event, Nature for Life Hub, titled Towards a Nature Positive Future, with a focus on increasing ambition for restoration. Today, the world faces the interconnected crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss, which individually and in combination aggravate poverty, inequalities, and food security, thereby hindering the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. The destruction of important ecosystems, such as forests and mangroves, does not only drive biodiversity loss, but also undermine nature's ability to sequester carbon in the atmosphere and protect against extreme weather events, accelerating climate change and increasing our vulnerability to it. Therefore, biodiversity loss and climate change must be tackled together. Nature-based solutions such as ecosystem restoration offers an opportunity to tackle both crises together and achieve a carbon neutral and nature positive future. This year marks the launch of the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which aims to reverse the damage we have caused to nature. Restoring ecosystems is a remarkable solution. It slows climate change, halts biodiversity loss, ensures land productivity for agriculture, and enhances livelihoods of our people. It also restores nature's buffer against zoonotic diseases and pandemics, while helping vulnerable communities to adapt to climate change impacts. We must spend more effort to make the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration a success. To meet climate, biodiversity, and land degradation targets, governments must allocate funds to restoration in their COVID-19 recovery packages. Businesses, banks, investors, and insurers must reform their operations and financial flows to restore the natural world. A key step is to start using natural capital alongside human and production capital. This will allow us to make investment decisions that aid sustainable growth and prosperity. Nigeria's national commitments in both environment and development-related plans already contain recommendations for a number of nature-based solutions. These commitments are demonstrated by the following intervention, amongst others. Expansion of protected areas by creating 10 additional national parks, including 2 marine protected areas cutting across the various ecological zones of Nigeria. Also, the sustainable management of critical wetland ecosystems across the country. The establishment of Great Green Wall or shelter belt across the frontline states over a distance of 1,500 kilometers and 15-kilometer width, stretching from the northwest to the northeast of Nigeria. Implementation of afforestation and reforestation programs to increase the nation's forest cover for climate mitigation and adaptation, and also coastal and mangrove ecosystem restoration to protect the fragile mangroves. Mangroves are an important nature-based solution to the climate crisis. They store carbon 4 times more than traditional rainforests, serve as shoreline protection against floods and storms, and prevent erosion and maintain water quality and clarity. They are a hub for biodiversity, all the while providing various economic benefits to our people in the coastal regions. Amidst all the critical discussions at this year's event, we must never forget to fight for nature. After all, we are part of nature, and we must create a world in which we can live in harmony with nature for the sake of our future generation. I encourage you all never to lose sight of that goal by consistently delivering your ambitious commitments for nature. I thank you all for your kind attention, and I wish you all success towards our common endeavor of safeguarding all life.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. And I would like to first of all thank the UNDP for organizing this very important Nature for Life Hub, and for my good friend Achim Steiner to be leading this process. I would like to say at the start that the world that we are facing today and we are living in today has really faced up to a very big challenge over the last 1 year. And we have learned two very important lessons, and both lessons are from nature. The first one is that we cannot sustain this war path with nature. We have to get off this war path with nature if we are to sustain humanity. Nature has reacted to humanity pushing its way into animal habitats, and the zoonotic disease is a reaction to that. This is a reaction that, as I said, we cannot face up to. So I think it is very important to understand that we need nature as an ally and not as an adversary as we develop into the 21st century. The second lesson is a positive lesson, and that is that if humanity takes a step back, then there is a better world possible. There is a nature positive recovery out there, what we call build back better. And I think that is the pathway that we all need to collectively take. In Pakistan, we have already pushed our economy onto that pathway. We learned that lesson during the last year and announced what is called the green stimulus to our economy. It had two parts. One is that we wanted to protect nature, and the other one is that we wanted to create jobs for the thousands of people who had become jobless because of COVID. And under this green stimulus, we have embarked upon three very ambitious projects. The first one is the 10 billion tree tsunami project, which was already undergoing, but we put renewed energy into it, more funds into it, with the objective that we want to restore our degraded forests. In Pakistan, since 2014, we have already restored over 600,000 hectares of forest land. And now we have pledged to restore over 1 million hectares of forest under the 10 billion tree program. This is a clear target-driven program which is restoring our forests from the mangroves to the riverine forest to the alpine forest in the north, but also creating jobs and livelihoods. Secondly, we have announced the Protected Area Initiative, which is expanding our wilderness areas, our national parks. And during the COVID era, Pakistan has increased its national parks by 50%, going from 30 to 45 in number, adding another 8,000 hectares under protection, and again creating jobs and livelihoods for the youth in the National Park Service. Thirdly, we are looking at a project called Recharge Pakistan, which is going to use our flood waters, which are a threat to us at this time, and turn it into an opportunity by diverting them towards our degraded wetlands. So it will restore the wetlands and at the same time recharge the groundwater aquifer also. And that is a project we are about to start. It is going to be a multi-billion rupee project, and again will create livelihoods and a green economy. So the message from our part of the world is that we need to invest in nature, and when we invest in nature, nature always pays us back economically, socially, and also politically, because it aligns a very big youth with your government. And this is a youth which is concerned about their future. So we need to be concerned about nature and about the future of our youth. So finally, I would just like to say that the world collectively needs to understand that there is no other pathway but a nature positive pathway. And the sooner we get onto it, the better it is going to be for the world. Thank you very much.
Let's take a look at the third pathway, increasing ambition on protecting nature. The High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People is a coalition of 70 countries, co-chaired by Costa Rica, France, and the United Kingdom. We are proud supporters of the High Ambition Coalition, who have done amazing work by bringing together the Leaders Pledge for Nature, but also supporting further ambition and the Global Oceans Alliance and other actions. Central to this coalition is the 30 by 30 target, aiming at protecting at least 30% of the world's land and oceans by 2030. The coalition also aims to increase public and private financing to ensure long-term effective management, including the management by Indigenous peoples and local communities, those that are on the front lines protecting our nature. Let's hear from some of the leading voices of the High Ambition Coalition on what they have to say about increasing ambition on protecting nature.
Excellences, chers participants, nous ne pouvons plus attendre pour agir pour la biodiversité. C'est le message principal que le Congrès mondial de la nature de l'UICN a adressé au monde. Ce message, nous devons l'entendre et y répondre. Et la réponse est à notre portée. Adopter un nouveau cadre mondial de préservation de la biodiversité à la COP15 de la Convention sur la diversité biologique en mesure de stopper la perte de la biodiversité et de la régénérer. L'adoption de ce cadre constitue la clé de voûte d'une nouvelle relation entre l'homme et la nature, plus harmonieuse et plus respectueuse. Au Congrès mondial de la nature, des milliers de personnes se sont engagées et nous ont engagés. Au travers des sommets, des événements, des motions et du manifeste de Marseille, les parties prenantes ont voulu partager leurs attentes, leur impatience. Nous ne pouvons pas ignorer ces appels. La France veut porter cette ambition et pousser ses partenaires et l'ensemble de la communauté internationale à répondre à l'urgence, en obtenant, à Kunming, des objectifs de préservation quantifiés et mesurables. Avec mes homologues du Costa Rica et du Royaume-Uni, nous coprésidons ainsi la coalition de la haute ambition pour la nature et les peuples, formée de plus de 70 États pour promouvoir, dans le nouveau cadre mondial, l'objectif de protection de 30% des terres et des mers. Mais les objectifs ne sont pas suffisants s'ils ne sont pas accompagnés d'un mécanisme de mise en œuvre robuste, ainsi que d'un soutien technologique et financier. Nous devons absolument mettre en place un dispositif efficace de suivi et d'accompagnement. De même, ces objectifs et leur mise en œuvre doivent faire l'objet de la plus large implication afin que tous les acteurs de la société se les approprient. Car la préservation de la biodiversité doit devenir un leitmotiv de toutes les politiques publiques, un élément transversal à tous les choix structurants des secteurs publics et privés. La nature doit enfin réintégrer sa juste place dans nos vies. Avec en ligne de mire la COP15, nous devons dès maintenant prendre des mesures concrètes au niveau national qui contribueront à la mise en œuvre des nouveaux objectifs globaux. Il nous faut en effet montrer l'exemple. À titre d'illustration, en France, nous avons publié une nouvelle stratégie sur les aires protégées qui montre comment nous comptons augmenter la surface de nos aires protégées tout en renforçant la qualité de notre protection d'ici 2030. Nous prévoyons également d'avoir 30% de nos terres et 30% de nos mers protégées d'ici l'année prochaine. Excellences, chers participants, il ne nous reste que quelques mois avant la COP15. Saisissons toutes les opportunités qui s'offrent à nous pour maintenir cet élan et avancer vers des résultats ambitieux. Il n'est pas trop tard, mais il n'y a plus de temps à perdre. Merci pour votre attention.
There can be no doubt now that if we continue to derail the natural systems on which we all depend, but particularly the world's poorest, then each and every one of our shared global goals, from peace to prosperity, will soon slip out of reach. So turning this trajectory around is the defining challenge of our age. And the good news is that we can. The beauty of protecting and restoring the abundance, diversity, and connectivity of life on Earth, beyond saving species from extinction, is that in doing so, we're tackling so many of the biggest challenges we face: poverty, pollution, even pandemics, and climate change, the biggest threat of all. Indeed, there is no credible or sensible pathway to net zero that does not involve protecting and restoring nature on a massive scale. And if we act now, nature-based solutions like forests, mangroves, and so on could provide around a third of the most cost-effective solutions that we need this decade. So as G7 and COP26 presidents, the UK is putting nature at the heart of our response, doubling our international climate finance, investing at least 3 billion of that in nature-based solutions for land and sea, and urging other countries to do similarly, and designing the conference in Glasgow to help us get the game-changing new commitments over the line. And that includes, of course, for forests. We're building alliances of countries committed to shifting the perverse agricultural incentives towards sustainability and towards breaking the link between global commodity supply chains and deforestation. We're pressing the big multilateral development banks to nature-proof their entire portfolios and to support countries in fulfilling their commitments to the Leaders' Pledge for Nature. And we're pulling every lever we have to get private finance flowing in the right direction, from reducing risk to increasing investment. And we're calling for greater recognition and a greater role for the indigenous peoples and local communities who've been sounding the alarm for decades now, continuing their centuries-long legacy of conservation without support and often in the face of acute danger and generations of injustice. We're co-leading global coalitions committed to significantly increasing the protection of the world's land and ocean during this decade. We have 120 countries on board and counting, including the whole of the G7, over 40% of global GDP and almost a third of the world's population. And when we come together in Kunming, the global biodiversity framework that we agree there must include ambitious global targets to bend the curve of biodiversity loss by 2030, to protect at least 30% of the world's ocean and land by 2030, and to see ecosystems restored, species population sizes recovering, and extinctions halted by 2050 at the latest. It must include the policies and finance that will make those targets a reality, and the strengthened reporting and review mechanisms that will hold parties to account. And with all three Rio Conventions set to meet, we need to make sure that they add up to more than the sum of their parts. Now, in truth, there is no good reason why we cannot make this decade the decade we reconcile our lives and our economies with the natural world on which we also completely depend. We have all the tools that we need. We just require the will and the resources to scale up fast. And in the UK, we're committed to continuing to work with all of you to make that happen. Thank you, and thank you for what you do.
The fourth pathway is aligning public sector finance. We heard earlier in the Nature for Life Hub that nearly 90% of agricultural subsidies and incentives go towards activities that can harm nature. Having just been part of the Food Summit for the UN, it's very clear that we need to look at the way in which we can assist agriculture in a productive, nature-positive manner. Repurposing the finance to foster a just and regenerative transition is a $470 billion opportunity. We also heard from countries conducting biodiversity finance assessments that one of the first steps in developing a finance plan for nature is to understand and realign public expenditures. We, all of us, must ask if our tax dollars, whether through agricultural subsidies, procurement policies, or development aid, public pension investments, or natural resource agency expenditures are aligned with a nature-positive future. Let's hear how global leaders from different sectors are aligning public sector finance to contribute to a greener, more just future. Many of these leaders are also courageously promoting brand new ways of shifting economic and financial systems to ensure greater well-being for people and planet.
I want to send my best wishes to everyone taking part in this session of the Nature for Life Hub. The next few months have the potential to be a turning point for our planet. Next week, part 1 of COP15, the UN Biodiversity Conference, will begin. And in just a few weeks, COP26, the UN Climate Change Conference, will take place in the great city of Glasgow. It represents the world's best chance, possibly one of our last chances, to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. Scotland is trying to lead by example in tackling the interrelated climate and biodiversity crises. By 2030, we will have reduced our greenhouse emissions by 3/4 from 1990 levels. And we're committed to achieving a just transition to net zero by 2045. We're also a proud signatory to the Edinburgh Declaration on Biodiversity. Ahead of COP15, more than 160 devolved, regional and local governments have signed the declaration, which calls for greater global ambition in tackling biodiversity loss. And we are taking major steps domestically to protect and to restore our natural environment. By the end of this decade, we will have protected 30% of Scotland's land for nature. We're further increasing our network of marine protection areas, and we're investing heavily in the restoration of peatlands and woodlands and other natural habitats. Government action and investment of this kind is hugely important, but we know that it won't be enough on its own. The level of action we need to see will require new and additional sources of investment. That's why Scotland, like other countries, is seeking opportunities to work more closely with business and the financial sector. After all, the decisions they make on which projects to support will be a huge determining factor in our ability to tackle this crisis. We know there is a growing recognition that investing in nature brings interrelated benefits to the environment, the economy, rural communities, and the general well-being of society. So we're working hard to encourage greater partnership between the public and private sectors as we try to meet this challenge. And as we do that, we are of course very keen to exchange ideas with partners from around the world. That's why Scotland will be jointly convening a special Finance for Nature event during COP26 in Glasgow. And it's why, ahead of that event, I welcome today's discussion. I hope it has helped to stimulate fresh ideas and insights on meeting this global challenge. I hope it has helped to focus minds and raise ambitions as we prepare for the Glasgow Summit. And I hope it will therefore make some contribution to ensuring that the months ahead are a milestone in the cause of protecting the planet.
By 2030, we need to be not only nature positive, carbon neutral, pollution free through a right-based approach. And in order to achieve that, particularly on nature positive, we need to do three things which are extremely critical. And yes, of course, the simple, logical one is to mobilize financial resources from all sources like never before. And this means that we need to really concentrate at the domestic, at the national level. We can do much better in mobilizing the domestic resources more efficiently, but even more important is the need to phase out the public investments, public incentives, and even subsidies that contribute to biodiversity loss, climate change, and the pollution of fresh water and the environment. All countries invest many more times financial resources in economic activities that contribute to biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution than what we invest in protecting nature, in sustainability, in going from where we are today into nature positive, in our need to be on track to 1.5%. So we got a problem of political coherence. That is why it is extremely important that, one, we mobilize domestic resources more efficiently. Second, we work in the political effort to align public finance in the right direction. And the third element, we need to accept that the institutional framework in the public sector, which has created this problem, needs to be adjusted to our needs. Institutions need to work at the landscape, seascape level instead of just on some natural resources. We still have agencies, public agencies that work with renewable natural resources and some other with non-renewable. So the three elements are key. But out of the three elements, the need to align public finance in our effort to be nature positive is extremely important. The work to be done there is critical. And we need to understand what are the ways by which we can begin generating political processes by which we generate more policy coherence. Because it doesn't make any sense to mobilize domestic resources to do the best out of the ODA for nature conservation if we still have decision-making processes, national planning processes that continues the business as usual and keep on investing in economic activities that probably generates short-term profits, but on the long run will not contribute to the overall aspiration of being nature positive. Being able to engage with those decision makers are critical. We need to put the data on the costs of not taking action, the environmental costs of continued business as usual, and we, from the conservation environmental sector, needs to really engage with those other policymakers. This is a great opportunity to really understand those political processes, because we just have 1 decade to really engage with those other sectors in a way that we may be generating better planning process, better decision-making processes, and the whole public investment structure investing in the same direction. Thank you so much.
Honorables, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the Asia and Pacific region has some of our planet's richest concentrations of biological diversity. It is home to 17 of the world's 36 biodiversity hotspots and 7 of its 17 mega-diverse countries. But they are all coming under increasing stress, with critical impact on food security, livelihood, public health, and disaster resilience. To assist our developing members in Asia and the Pacific respect nature and reduce biodiversity loss, the Asian Development Bank has been strategically using our resources to offer innovative financing for nature and biodiversity projects. This includes direct financing and credit enhancement, along with other financial instruments such as green bonds, blue bonds, blended finance, and public-private partnerships. For example, together with bilateral partners, we designed and implemented the Biodiversity Conservation Corridor Initiative in the Greater Mekong subregions to reduce fragmentation of ecosystems across 7 transboundary biodiversity landscapes. The conservation corridors allow natural habitats to be maintained, save biodiversity, and wildlife to move around more safely. Another example is the Regional Flyway Initiative. ADB is conducting evaluation assessments along the East Asian Australasian Flyway to identify priority sites where we need to invest in protecting wildlife habitats and also strengthening ecosystem services. The Flyway is also expected to provide livelihoods for more than 50 million people. On financing, we are also helping create public-private partnerships for coral reef insurance in Asia and the Pacific. This initiative is developing a new parametric insurance product to enhance disaster resilience and promote marine conservation. And to help raise the capital needed to preserve ocean health, we just issued on 10 September our first dual trans blue bonds, denominated in Australian and New Zealand dollars. Capturing lessons from ADB engagement in this area, as well as global best practices, we are preparing to release in 2022 the Nature Positive Investment Roadmap. It will offer a blueprint for scaling up nature positive investment in ADB's operations and supporting our countries move onto a more nature positive path in their decision-making processes. This roadmap will also help mainstream biodiversity and nature-based solutions in infrastructure projects, whether in transport, seaports, energy, water, telecommunications, or urban development. To implement the roadmap, ADB will establish the Natural Capital Lab. The lab is a virtual platform bringing together knowledge, tools, and best practices around nature capital. It will incubate, accelerate, and expand natural capital investment using natural capital accounting, payments for ecosystem services, and blended finance through the innovative Natural Capital Financing Facility. As COVID-19 pandemic evolved, it has become a wake-up call from nature, reinforcing the integral nexus between humans, animals, and nature coexisting on one planet. So let us all work together, strengthen our partnerships, and work toward preserving Mother Earth. Thank you very much.
Dear all, the fortunes of our towns, cities, and regions are deeply dependent on our environment. Our natural environment sustains us with the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the water we drink. It provides us with energy, the means to address climate change, and opportunities to improve physical and mental health. The pandemic reminded us yet again of the links between human activity and the natural environment. 70% of emerging diseases and almost all known pandemics, including COVID-19, have been transferred to humans from animals, a process accelerated by human interference with biodiversity. We have reached a point where it is now not enough to simply reduce or stop activities that harm our environment. We need to invest to rebuild our environment. We need to invest in a green recovery that puts nature at its core. That investment needs to be a shared responsibility. It needs to be shared across different levels of government. Our work at the OECD shows that some national governments are already responsible for 55% of climate and environment-related spending and 64% of climate and environment-related investments. Many subnational governments are using these resources to implement nature-based solutions. These initiatives are reintroducing nature into urban environments and helping to generate climate benefits. They promote biodiversity and provide local amenities. They improve resilience to natural disasters, minimize investment needs in hard infrastructure, and they create local jobs. We see powerful examples of this in Malmö, Sweden, for instance, which is piloting smart green mobility options and expanding green spaces to mitigate flooding. And also in the Amazonas in Colombia, which is leveraging knowledge from local and indigenous communities to preserve forest and water reserves. Yet, our survey with over 50 cities and regions worldwide show that 2/3 of them, actually 73%, do not have enough funding to implement the green transition. These pressures are likely to worsen as the pandemic has strained local government finances. Investment in the green recovery also needs to be shared with businesses. Many businesses have already committed to protecting and restoring biodiversity through their own corporate activities and investments. Yet the majority of businesses need to do more, in particular small and medium-sized enterprises, the SMEs, which in Europe, for instance, contribute 60 to 70% of industrial pollution. And actually, many small businesses are already leading the way. In the United Kingdom and Finland, for example, small and medium-sized enterprises represent 70 to 90% of clean tech enterprises. We need to take steps to incentivize and enable more small firms to follow their lead and embrace the green transition. That is why at COP26, the OECD will launch a new platform on financing SMEs for sustainability. This platform will bring together public banks, international organizations, small businesses and entrepreneurs to find ways to unlock finance for investment in sustainable and green business models. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a unique opportunity to invest in a green recovery that puts nature at its core, but to seize it, we need all partners to play a role. At the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SME, Regions and Cities, we are determined to play ours. We will continue to provide policy recommendations, data, and inspiring examples to support policymakers, local governments, small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as social economy organizations to shape a nature-positive future. We look forward to joining forces with you all in this mission. Thank you.
Just as we need to align public sector finance, we also need to align private sector finance. We need to make sure we take out perversities in the market, including those subsidies that place a value on brown versus green investments. The total value of global assets under management is more than 100 trillion US dollars. The total annual gap for financing the SDGs is about $3 trillion. In other words, investing just 3% of global assets under management would fully finance the SDGs. Moreover, the relative annual cost of investing in nature is trivial. And we've seen the same with regard to our recovery plans across the globe that continue to not put enough money and funds into nature. It would cost just $100 billion a year to clean up the world's oceans, $100 billion for expanding protected areas to 30% of the planet, and $200 billion to restore 1 billion hectares of degraded lands. That's less than 0.5% of global GDP and of global assets under management. Aligning private sector finance is an urgent and critical opportunity to fill the gap in financing nature. Let's hear what global philanthropic business and faith and investment leaders have to say about how they are aligning finance for a nature-positive future. How can we optimize public-private partnerships for good?
It's great to participate in UNDP's Nature for Life Hub. Philanthropy can play a major role in delivering a nature-positive future, but a few transformations in the scale and the approach of philanthropy are needed to make that happen. First, we're going to need a much larger share of the philanthropic giving going towards nature. There aren't great statistics, but globally, when we look at the numbers, less than 3% of giving goes to environmental causes. But we all know that conserving nature isn't just an environmental issue, it's a development issue. And if done right, it's a human rights issue. And we all know how critical nature is to climate change. Philanthropy must understand that healthy natural systems are a prerequisite for every other social and economic issue to succeed. More foundations are coming into this space and giving more, which is encouraging. On September 22nd, 8 foundations joined the Weiss Foundation and announced the largest ever philanthropic commitment to nature conservation, pledging $5 billion to help protect and conserve at least 30% of the planet by 2030. That is an exciting progress, and I think it is just the beginning. In addition to ramping up the amount of finances from philanthropy, we need to encourage some changes and improvements in the way donors invest. First, philanthropic giving must go to the most effective and most directly involved people. That means funding indigenous peoples and local communities who serve as the stewards for the majority of the world's biodiversity, but unfortunately receive a disproportionately small amount of available funding. New efforts to scale up financing for land tenure for indigenous peoples and local communities are encouraging, and philanthropy can provide the key early funding to mechanisms proposed and led by indigenous peoples and local communities that will ensure that funding reaches the ground. Next, donors must be willing to invest in places for the long term. We've all witnessed the boom and bust project-based funding. It's time for longer-term commitments to people and places, which is why I'm so happy to see the new Legacy Landscapes Fund and the Enduring Earth Initiative. The diversity of nature on Earth and the diversity of people working to safeguard it requires us to be open to a multitude of strategies. If we intend to achieve the transformational change that scientists say is needed, then that by definition means a departure from the status quo. That means investing in the areas that are challenging but most essential for biodiversity. Philanthropy is stepping in and playing a greater role than ever to make a nature-positive future. There's much more to do, but I'm encouraged by the direction we're headed.
Hello, my name is Aaron Bloomgarden, and I'm the founder and executive director of Emergent. We face both a climate emergency and an extinction crisis. The only path to addressing this challenge and to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement requires a rapid and massive reduction in deforestation. This requires collective action. There's not one company or even a sector that can address this alone. This is where the LEAF Coalition comes in. LEAF is a public-private initiative created to spur catalytic and systemic change by mobilizing massive new sources of finance to forest jurisdictions that demonstrably increase ambition to protect their forests. LEAF includes participants from civil society, the public sector, and the private sector. And LEAF is a breakthrough, a step change in terms of scale, integrity, and impact towards reversing global deforestation and providing finance to protect the world's tropical and subtropical forests.
I'm Leo Birnbaum, CEO of E.ON, and we are very proud to be part of the LEAF Coalition. Ahead of COP26, time for promises is over, it's time for action. For us at E.ON, decarbonizing energy supply is essential for fighting climate change, and our goal is to be carbon neutral by 2040. We also know it takes more than ambitious emission cuts and net zero targets. Without protecting tropical forests now, our outlook is bleak. To deal with a global crisis, a global response is needed. Strong partnerships are needed to make a real difference fast enough. As a member of the LEAF Coalition, we are participating on a grander scale to tackle climate change and halt deforestation. We do believe in the power of the many. We call upon our customers, our partners and suppliers to help us to tackle climate change and to halt deforestation by protecting tropical forests. Together, let's make a difference ahead of COP26.
Hello, my name is Suzanne DiBianca, and I'm the Chief Impact Officer at Salesforce. Tropical forests around the world support the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people, and they support biodiversity that's critical for our ecosystems so that they can thrive. But forests are also in peril. We've deforested 3 trillion of 6 trillion trees on our planet, so it's critical that we protect the ones that remain. At Salesforce, we believe that business is the greatest platform for change, and we consider the environment to be a key stakeholder in our strategy. That's why Salesforce has joined as a founding partner of the LEAF Coalition, the single largest private sector investment to mobilize at least $1 billion for large-scale tropical forest protection and sustainable development. This global initiative is the kind of bold leadership and climate ambition that we need to meet the Paris targets. We know that tropical forests are one of humanity's most important assets. We need everyone to be part of the solution to take meaningful action to protect and restore our forests while we still have the time.
And this is just the beginning. We have to go much bigger, move faster, and massively increase ambition. Wherever you are now, whatever you're doing, wherever you're working, ask yourselves not how you can double efforts, but how you can 10 or 20 times efforts to scale up climate solutions. And LEAF is a platform for collective action. We invite companies, civil society, and governments to join as we protect the world's forests. Together, we can make a real difference. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to join you today at this Nature for Life session. The BTG Pactual Timberland Investment Group is joining forces with the Nature Conservancy to deliver on the enormous potential of sustainably managed forests. Together, our initiative will address the twin crises of biodiversity loss and climate change to protect critical landscapes and drive climate action across the United States. TIG has a history of sustainably managing global timberland assets that seek to generate attractive returns for the world's leading institutional investors. We are one of the world's largest and oldest timberland managers, with over 3 million acres under management throughout the US and Latin America. When it comes to climate action, institutional investors who control trillions of dollars in the global economy have an important role to play. Like companies, investors are committing to net zero climate targets. More than $43 trillion in assets and investment portfolios have already been committed to net neutrality by 2050. Investors are increasingly looking for positive social and environmental impacts in addition to returns from their investments. And increasingly, they're searching for ways to align their portfolios with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Nature might just be the answer.
You know I agree, Mark. The Nature Conservancy has a long history of developing new solutions for the world's urgent environmental threats, led by our values and grounded by our science. There is an enormous opportunity in natural climate solutions, which use the power of nature to store carbon through science-based conservation, restoration, and land management actions. They are powerful, cost-effective, and can be put to work right now. While we need to pursue every tool available to rapidly decarbonize our economy, nature is one of our best options in the response to climate change today. Protecting, restoring, and sustainably managing forests are one of the most high-impact natural climate solutions available to us. In the US, forests and forest products currently capture and store almost 15% of the country's carbon emissions from the burning of fossil fuels. They have the potential to capture nearly twice as much if we plant more trees, use climate-smart practices to manage our forests, and take other actions. It gets better. As you know, in addition to climate change, the world is facing a rapidly unfolding crisis in biodiversity loss. Sustainably managed forests deliver a range of additional benefits to biodiversity, like habitat protection, water quality, and resistance to pests or devastating megafires. Outright protection of standing forests is critical, but improving the management of working forest opens a huge opportunity to maximize the climate and biodiversity contributions of a widely held financial asset class. Timberland is a fundamental component of our economy, producing lumber and essential paper products. And if we can make nature an investment, we open up a clear path to climate and biodiversity action at scale.
The goal of our initiative is to demonstrate that it is possible to manage forests in North America for climate and biodiversity impacts while also delivering financial returns from investment in sustainably managed forests. We have seen an enormous surge of interest among investors in climate-positive forestry and climate investments generally. But the challenge to date is finding opportunities at scale that provide access to high-quality investments with sufficiently robust environmental and social ambition and safeguards. The commercial forest industry knows how to do things at the scale required. But addressing the climate and biodiversity crises requires that commercial forestry deliver significant additional benefits for climate, biodiversity, and local communities beyond business as usual. This new collaboration aims to change this paradigm. TNC will serve as conservation advisor to create conservation criteria for TIG's core timberland strategy in the US. This amounts to more than $850 million out of TIG's $4 billion global timberland portfolio, or nearly 530,000 acres across the country, an area more than half the size of Rhode Island. TNC and TIG will establish specific recommendations to drive enhanced climate and conservation outcomes for each property while seeking to maintain or enhance financial performance.
We know firsthand how a sustainable forest management approach can deliver meaningful results for climate and biodiversity alongside timber yields. Building upon decades of donor-supported research, TNC has developed and demonstrated sustainable forest management practices that deliver climate and biodiversity benefits while producing revenues. In the Central Appalachian region of the United States, TNC launched a $130 million private investment fund in 2019 to acquire and manage 250,000 acres of working forest in the same region. In its first 2 years, the fund has already realized benefits ranging from carbon sequestration and habitat protection to water quality and support for local economic development. Together with TIG, we look forward to bringing this approach to scale. As conservation advisor to their core U.S. timberland strategy, we are incredibly excited to help identify, manage, and achieve the vast climate and biodiversity benefits inherent in the timberland asset class.
Enhancing climate action and conservation from working forests is essential for delivering on the promise of natural climate solutions. To do this, we need to mobilize private capital, including institutional investment at significantly larger scales. With this new initiative, we hope to enable new and larger opportunities for conservation, continue to generate risk-adjusted returns, while also showing a path forward for broader timber investment management practices in North America and elsewhere.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Husna Ahmed, and I'm the CEO of Global One 2015, which is a Muslim women-led INGO. And I'm delighted to be part of the Faith Plans, which is a very ambitious plan for the future of the globe. I think it's an absolute imperative that the faith communities come together globally. We are running out of time, because if we don't act now, it will be too late. We have to act today, now. And the Faith Plans are an initiative. It's a program that really helps structure and support all of us to tackle environmental degradation and climate change. You know, we can do it. And I really believe, and as a Muslim, I have hope. I know that I'm a steward of this planet. And I feel that the more of us that come together, we will definitely make a difference, and we will be able to halt the climate catastrophe that is imminent. Thank you.
We inherited a beautiful world. All the major faiths celebrate the natural world as a gift of the divine. But in a world facing multiple crises, from climate change and environmental collapse to historic inequalities and the coronavirus pandemic, what we do matters. People of faith from all over the world are coming together to take action for people and planet. Motivated by their beliefs and values, they are working to empower their communities and deliver concrete change on climate change, on the environment, on biodiversity, and sustainable development. Faith Plans for People and Planet is a fast-growing initiative bringing together faith communities from all around the world. In fact, it is already the biggest and most ambitious environmental initiative ever developed by the faiths. Already, hundreds of faith groups, from Buddhists, Christians, and Hindus to Jews, Muslims, Sikhs, and more, have signed up to develop faith plans, commitments to use their assets, investments, and influence for the benefit of people and planet. Join us. If we work together, we really can make the difference the world so badly needs. Faiths are major stakeholders in the planet, owning or managing an astonishing array of assets, from buildings and land to health facilities and schools. Faith Plans for People and Planet is a program developed by faiths for faiths. It's organized by Faith Invest and the WWF's Beliefs and Values program, and is already supported by dozens of faith and environmental organizations around the world, including grassroots groups in Kenya, foundations in China, UN agencies, and the world's leading faith networks. So how does it work? First, you go over to faithplans.org and sign up to join forces with hundreds of other faith communities around the world. Then you form a planning team to work on a dedicated plan that is right for your organization, with plenty of support from the Faith Plans team and community. If enough of us come together, and the Faith Plans community grows large enough, we really can change the world. But the clock is already ticking. The world is facing a climate emergency. Scientists say it's code red for humanity. Time is running out, and the future depends on what we do in the next few years. When we face our challenges hand in hand, motivated by faith, inspired by hope, we are as strong as we are diverse. That's the power of faith. Join us, sign up, take action.
My name is Martin Palmer, and I am the patron of Faith Plans, a joint project by Faith Invest and WWF International's Beliefs and Values program, working with every major religious tradition around the world on environmental commitments. Faith Plans is helping the faiths to develop long-term plans, plans that will shape and change the way that faiths use their assets. We are amongst one of the largest groups of investors. We run 50% of all schools and a third of all universities. We are, in other words, stakeholders in the planet. We are rolling out over the next 6 to 9 months hundreds of programs around the world with key faith organizations from China to Latin America, the largest single movement by the faiths on the environment that has ever happened. And we are delighted to be invited to join the Seeds Collective and to be partners with you in this civil society movement.
In October 2019, Bank of Ireland was approached by Coillte Nature, the not-for-profit arm of the Irish State Forestry Company, with a problem. Coillte Nature had a mandate to plant 70,000 hectares of new native woodlands, but no money to finance the project. The solution we came up with was the Woodland Nature Credit, which allows corporates to fund large-scale afforestation in return for an environmental coupon. The key to the solution was to focus on the new native woodland as an asset with 3 distinct areas of value: carbon sequestration, biodiversity uplift, and amenity value. We launched the product in June this year, opting to close out a proof of concept transaction of €2 million nominal, representing 200 hectares or around 600,000 native trees. The arrangement is for 25 years and delivers carbon benefits of 100 years. Under the terms of the arrangement, the corporate investor receives an environmental coupon based on carbon sequestration, biodiversity uplift, and amenity value. These outputs are calculated using internationally recognized standards, and the instrument has been designed to be EU taxonomy compliant. In order to safeguard the flow of environmental benefits, the 200 hectares of new native woodland is spread across a number of geographical sites. The transaction is unique in that the corporate investor does not buy the land or the trees, they buy the flow of environmental benefits, the ecosystem services that result from the plantation. Independent third-party verification will ensure that the quantum of benefits is accurate. The governance is further reinforced by KPMG, who provided second-party assurance for the product, and the continuing involvement of an independent scientific panel of Irish academics. The corporate can use these benefits in respect of their non-financial reporting obligations, in pursuit of net zero carbon targets, or for general CSR strategy objectives. For the initial tranche, we were delighted that AXA, the insurance giant, bid to take the entire issue. Interest is healthy, meaning that a second tranche is already under consideration. Overall, the transaction delivers benefits to the borrower, to the investor, but also health and well-being benefits to Irish society as a whole. I think this transaction is one of the most important nature-based financial mechanisms that has emerged in 2021 for a number of reasons. Firstly, it proves that amongst large corporates, there is healthy appetite to invest in nature at scale. Secondly, it illustrates how scale can be delivered without commoditizing nature. Securitizing the ecosystem benefits is an elegant and subtle solution. Thirdly, the measurement, reporting, and verification methodologies, which are so important to transactions of this type, are robust and should encourage capital into this space. Lastly, the securitization of ecosystem services offers a route for those seeking investment in nature at scale, and Bank of Ireland is delighted to have played a part in moving the dial in this respect.
For too long, our market has failed to account for nature's values. Businesses have had a free pass to profit at the expense of nature and of the communities who depend on nature's services. The signs are everywhere. The era of the nature-blind economy is rapidly coming to a close. It is exciting to see the growth of initiatives such as the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, helping to make businesses accountable for their impacts on nature, or even the new taxonomy at the European level, and similar types of systems that are being developed across the globe. Businesses that embrace this trend will have a leg up in a new nature economy, and businesses that ignore this trend do so at their peril. In this sixth pathway, aligning business practices, we'll hear what business leaders are thinking about how to align business practices with a nature-positive future.
Ladies and gentlemen, business leaders and friends, it is a pleasure to speak to you about the road to a nature-positive future. Today, we find ourselves in what is arguably the most critical period of our lifetimes. Our window of opportunity to respond to the planetary crisis is closing. Climate change, biodiversity collapse, and pollution are more devastatingly apparent with each passing day. The good news is that we still have time to change course, but we have to act now. It is crucial for businesses to recognize their role in this fight. We have a responsibility to seize the opportunities that nature-positive actions can unleash in the quest to protect the planet and transform the global economy. Business incentives have to be reshaped to support global public goods. Strong and sustainable businesses are built on global values, including human and labor rights, environmental sustainability, and fighting corruption, all of which are embodied in the mission of the United Nations Global Compact. This is about investing in nature, in the ecosystems that support all life on Earth. It means the private sector must act more holistically to secure the health of our planet. The interconnected crises of climate, biodiversity, and pollution require urgent action. To revive damaged ecosystems, the private sector must accelerate urgent climate action. Businesses must integrate biodiversity and ecosystem protection and restoration into all their operations. At the UN Global Compact, we help businesses advance their work in support of these goals. Through the Science Based Targets Initiative, we are launching the first global standard for net zero carbon business. Responsible companies know that emission reduction targets have to be backed up by concrete, measurable plans and actions. In the end, to leave no one behind, we must all work together to ensure positive impacts on both the environment and people's livelihoods in every region. Companies that take ambitious climate action also mitigate the immense health costs of climate change, including conditions linked to air pollution, malnutrition, extreme weather events, and infectious disease. And beyond emissions reduction, building resilience and adaptation through nature-based solutions has been a focus of the UN Global Compact. We strongly believe that companies need to integrate nature-based thinking into their long-term sustainability and resiliency strategies. For example, our blueprint for a climate-smart ocean puts forward recommendations on ocean-based solutions to climate change and to biodiversity loss. Nature-based water solutions also restore watersheds and ecosystem health and provide a wide range of other advantages, including climate resilience and social, cultural, and economic benefits. Through our CEO Water mandate, the UN Global Compact is helping companies invest in collective action while providing tools to identify and account for the multiple benefits that arise from these investments. As Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said, now is the time to transform humankind's relationship with the natural world and with each other. So let us unite in the business of responding to our planetary crisis and work towards a decade of hope and transformation. Thank you.
Today, decarbonization is the imperative, but this is not the only one, because we also need to heal and restore the natural capital that we depleted in the last centuries. Greenhouse gases, microplastics, agrochemical residues in ecosystems, degraded land and suburbs, scrap in general, water waste and pollution. These are all same consequence of our so-called extractive model, a society which is designed in a way it creates a lot of entropy, meant as disorder, which accumulates in our world. Nature doesn't create entropy, not only because it is an open system, but also because for each biosynthetic process, there is the reverse biodegradation one, in which all wastes are resources, and this circularity with zero waste goes over and over and over and over infinitely. We are now in the middle of a transition to a new era, a transition to a new development model, which has not been fully designed, also because it's probably impossible to design it, because it's too complex. So the real architect of this new design, this new development model is chaos and complexity, which are typically very good designers. But we must make sure we don't make, with this new model, the same mistake as we did in the past, to create a new model which continues to create entropy. This is why we believe the new development model should be regenerative, and which means relying upon natural resources which are regenerable and regenerative as much as possible. And for the rest of the so-called artificial activities or human activities, to mimic nature and organize processes in perfect circularity. Corporations are the key stakeholder for this change, because they are the only one with a critical mass in terms of investments, in terms of innovation, in terms of influence to really make it happen. And this is why we, together with few enlightened entrepreneurs, founded the Regenerative Society Foundation, which I have the privilege to co-chair together with Jeffrey Sachs. The Regenerative Society Foundation aims at building a movement of regenerative corporations and maximizing their regenerative impact. Our vision is that we can build a new society in which humans can live in perfect harmony with nature, relying upon resources produced by nature and healing ecosystems. A society which will, thanks to that, be inclusive, protective for the citizens, making them happier and safer. Welcome to the Regenerative Society.
For us, regenerative agriculture means turning the cycle and being inspired by nature. And this is also about reducing our carbon emission by just listening and following the nature. And for the remaining part of CO2 that is emitted through our farming practices, to bring it back to the soil where it should be and to enrich and regenerate the soil. So it's just going into a positive cycle that will allow us to be more efficient from a carbon standpoint, to have farmers more resilient, and obviously have a new value proposition for customers. So it's just a positive cycle that we need to get it right. We started years ago to first believe in trees and then plant 5 million trees since 2014. But before talking about trees, we need to remind us that there are ways through regenerative agriculture to reduce our carbon emission, right? So the trees comes for the remaining part that goes in the air and that we have to bring back to the soil. So the trees is a carbon sink, is a soil enricher, is a soil fixer. So it's an enabler of this positive cycle inspired by nature. As the World Economic Forum told us, we should aim to plant 1 trillion trees to, sequestrate and bring back this carbon from the air to the earth. We believe that the trees is an amazing bridge between, what's in the air and has to come back to the soil and will regenerate the soil. So it's an enabler, and we need more trees every day. I think we should, we look at farmers as producers. We look here at farmers as service providers. On top of producing and delivering goods, they are service providers, maintaining ecosystem, maintaining biodiversity, and we need to incentivize them for this service to us. This is probably not the case yet, at least not enough, but we really see the farmers as serving the whole world, maintaining landscape and ecosystem. Well, we already see the effects, and if you go on a farm and talk to farmers and ask about their concern, climate change will likely come top of the list. They see the reality, the impact every single day. They go up in the mountain to grow coffee. That's their daily reality. So the impact is there, and we need to de-risk coffee growing activities. We need to de-risk the farmers if we want them to continue to produce this amazing product. And if they don't, we have a serious problem as a business anyway. So it's a win-win situation where we have to build resilience for the farmers so that we can be successful as a business. We can protect them. We can, train them, bring technical assistance, bring some new varieties, but we can also protect them against climate versatility. We can create, and we tested that in Colombia already. We have 7,000 farmers in Colombia protected through insurance against rainy or non-rainy seasons. We will expand in Central America this crop insurance idea where no matter what's happening from a climate standpoint, a disaster, a hurricane, we want the farmers protected for their work and protect their revenue through insurance. Well, I have plenty of examples, but I have one recent one that is very close to my heart because obviously very emotional. It's around bees. And actually we started a few months ago a pilot test in Colombia where we implemented connected hives in a few farms in the Caldas region. And we got the first result just recently, so I'm happy to share that with you. Those farms who implemented this hive and could produce honey not only had a better yield through pollination, but also had a crop or revenue diversification. But the net income of these farmers grew up by 27%. That is fascinating. Just by being inspired by nature, not only fixing some problems, but increasing the farmer's revenue is a great and amazing positive cycle. We need to accelerate this move. We need to go faster. We need to go bolder to move in this regenerative. That's the only way out, right? And we see every single day proof points, examples of this positive impact that this move to regenerative agriculture can create for the farmers, for us, for society. Well, as I told you, the World Economic Forum told us that we need 1 trillion trees. There is space for everybody to join the journey. If we believe, and I think we should believe, in the power of trees as a force for good, we need millions of people joining the movement, planting trees everywhere we can. We can debate. Will it fix the problems? It will definitely help. There is no doubt about that. So join us, help ourselves. Everybody should be part of this journey.
The 7th pathway is reimagining development. We heard earlier that our development model needs a rehaul, that we must measure progress with a planetary adjusted index. We need to look at new indicators for growth and value nature, as well as people, planet, and prosperity together. We also heard from national leaders about how spatial data, powered by the UN Biodiversity Lab, is transforming development in their countries, helping to put nature at the heart of sustainable development planning. But to reimagine development, we need new definitions and new models. Let's hear from leading thinkers about what these definitions and models might look like.
Our world is facing 3 pressing global challenges: the climate emergency, nature in crisis, and mounting inequality. At WBCSD, we recently published Vision 2050, Time to Transform, a report that provides a framework for a long-term vision that we can all rally behind. 9+ billion people living well within planetary boundaries by mid-century. Business action to halt and reverse nature loss needs to become transformational through investments and collaborations that contribute to an equitable, net zero, and nature positive future. A nature positive approach is needed to strengthen the resilience of our planet and the communities in which we all live. The scale and scope of business action needs an ambitious nature policy framework that puts in place clear targets, the right incentives, and the right support mechanisms. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework that will be debated by member states and key stakeholder groups before adoption next year at the CBD COP is a critical opportunity to implement clear nature policy. Our call from the global leading business community to member states finalizing the framework is to bring higher ambition and greater urgency. Given the failure to achieve the Aichi biodiversity targets, parties must agree on an ambitious global goal for nature to halt and reverse today's catastrophic nature loss, and we have to start now. Business will welcome coherent direction for positive action on nature. Long-term certainty to encourage the uptake of nature-positive business models and to make sure that investments and business decision-making support the protection, restoration, and sustainable use of natural resources. Nature-positive means halting and reversing nature loss by 2030. We've got to do this starting from a baseline of 2020. For WBCSD, we've convened with business and a series of multi-stakeholder dialogues to help develop a shared understanding of what the building blocks are that will guide credible and coherent business contributions to a nature-positive, net zero, and equitable world. This has a line behind 6 building blocks for nature positive. 1, assess all realms of nature and prioritize impacts and dependencies within business operations and value chains. Then commit to setting ambitious, science-informed goals to both halt and reverse the loss of nature. Then we must measure and value. This requires developing indicators to measure nature outcomes that inform the right decision-making. Then, of course, action. We must systemically apply the mitigation hierarchy within and beyond corporate operations. That will help us transform with collaborative action to achieve nature-positive outcomes across all spheres of control and, of course, influence as well. Then finally, disclosure and reporting is key. So businesses must be prepared to disclose material, nature-related information in ways that are coherent, credible, and consistent. These building blocks will set business on the right path for understanding and responding to nature-related risks and opportunities in their own operations, as well as through their value chains, and ultimately having impact on nature positive at a systems level. As we support the preparations for the science-based targets for nature and the task force for nature-related financial disclosure, due to be finalized in 2022 and 2023 respectively, we urgently need to mobilize business in getting on track with this nature-positive journey. Momentum for a nature-positive guiding star is building day by day. In addition to the G7, nearly 90 heads of state have signed the Leaders' Pledge for Nature to reverse the loss of biodiversity by 2030. It's a goal also supported by 126 Nobel laureates in our One Planet, Our Future statement. More than 700 businesses have rallied behind a call for nations to reverse nature loss as soon as possible. In the finance sector, the new task force on nature-related financial disclosure will help direct investments towards a nature-positive future. And faith and youth leaders have issued manifestos calling for this decade to be a turning point towards living in harmony with nature. Nature positive is now a movement, and it makes business sense. Nature is everyone's business, and we welcome collective, collaborative, co-working to deliver success.
Good afternoon. It is an honor to have been invited to address you today. There is now no escaping the fact that we are collectively damaging nature at an alarming rate. For the first time in 65 million years, the number of species worldwide is in a sustained mass decline. And yet, the economic and financial risks that can and will arise from the continued degradation of nature remain largely overlooked or misunderstood. That is why, back in spring 2019, I was asked by the UK Treasury to undertake an independent global review on the economics of biodiversity. The review considers nature as an asset, indeed our most precious asset. For some decades now, the way in which humanity has prospered has meant that our demands on nature have far exceeded its ability to supply them sustainably. In other words, we are collectively mismanaging our assets and depleting vital ecosystems like our rainforests, peatlands, and coastal mangroves, in some cases to the point of collapse. This is the result of institutional failure writ large. Our economic models do not reflect nature's worth to society. Since the value of the goods and services it provides does not show up in market prices, we take from nature more than it can sustainably supply, damaging it irreparably. The solution starts by understanding a simple truth. Our economies are embedded within nature, not external to it. Accepting this helps us to reshape our interpretation of what sustainable development really means and to redefine our economic models accordingly. The challenge is formidable, but the same ingenuity that has led us to make demands on nature that are so large can be redeployed to bring about transformative change. In line with the theme of this year's event, let this be a decade of hope and transformation.
The eighth pathway is resetting the relationship between people and the planet. Around the world, we see evidence of a broken relationship across rural and urban communities. Indigenous peoples claim ownership of about a third of the world's land surface, but have legal recognition of their rights to only a small fraction of these lands. Governments and corporations routinely disregard the rights of Indigenous peoples, claiming water rights, timber rights, and mining rights as their own. Poor communities often find themselves on the wrong end of a polluting pipeline, a smokestack, or mining pit, or in urban settings. Land defenders routinely face intimidation, arrest, violence, and murder. 227 environmental defenders were killed last year, and this year will likely be even higher. It's time for a reset. Let's hear inspiring stories from local, national, and indigenous leaders to learn what they are doing to reset the relationship between people and the planet.
Los pueblos indígenas vivimos en los sitios del mundo en donde se mantienen ecosistemas más cuidados. No es casualidad. No nos sentimos superiores al resto de seres con los cuales convivimos en esos territorios. Ahí convivimos con nuestros ancestros, cuidamos para las siguientes generaciones. Somos parte integral e indivisible del territorio y consideramos a la naturaleza sagrada y reconocemos que formamos parte integral de ella. Esa visión define nuestras prácticas de espiritualidad, convivencia y buen uso de los recursos naturales, que fundamenta el buen vivir. No vemos el territorio como una fuente de riqueza. Ahí viven nuestros espíritus protectores, los cerros y montañas sagradas. Todos los seres vivientes somos interdependientes. Ese mundo natural nos provee agua, aire, tierra, alimentos, medicamentos, y nosotros los seres humanos debemos cuidarla y protegerla. Para asegurar esa profunda relación entre las personas y la naturaleza, cada uno de nuestros pueblos cuenta con normas comunitarias, acordadas y aplicadas de forma colectiva a través de nuestros sistemas de autogobierno. Esas normas y prácticas nos han permitido a lo largo del tiempo aplicar, generar e innovar conocimientos que fortalecen nuestra identidad colectiva, aseguran la sostenibilidad y calidad de vida. Esas normas sirven para proteger, gestionar y restaurar de manera sostenible ecosistemas naturales y modificados. Sirven los conocimientos y prácticas indígenas para la sostenibilidad. Nos permiten promover medidas de seguridad, de tenencia del territorio y nos generan evidencia que demuestran que proporcionan bienestar humano y beneficios de la biodiversidad, pues contribuyen a reducir la degradación ambiental, consolidan su seguridad y soberanía alimentaria, fortalecen nuestros medios de vida y nos hacen más resilientes ante los impactos del cambio climático. Para que se mantengan esas relaciones armónicas y sostenibles, es indispensable la posesión y control sobre nuestros territorios colectivos, contar con nuestras propias estructuras de gobernanza y espacios para la transmisión intergeneracional de nuestros sistemas de conocimientos.
Thank you for the opportunity to join the United Nations Development Programme's Nature for Life Hub this year, and this discussion on resetting our relationship with nature. We are witnessing across the planet an alarming decline in biodiversity, staggering rates of extinction, and the severity of climate change is increasing by the day. These are all global crises that must be met with urgency, innovation, and resolve. While we work to accelerate progress on all these complex challenges, we must keep environmental justice at the forefront of our decision-making. Vulnerable and underserved communities are often most reliant on the essential services provided by nature, whether for subsistence foods or to support their livelihoods. Being in nature also supports our spiritual and mental well-being, a fact that can only be realized through personal experiences in nature. Too many children in communities across the globe do not have access to these opportunities to experience firsthand our forests, rivers, beaches, and oceans. The work that we do to protect nature, to protect the health and safety of all of our communities, and to provide opportunities to experience nature must be prioritized in all our actions. Protecting our vulnerable and underserved communities and increasing access to decision-making is a top priority for the United States Environmental Protection Agency and for our international partnerships. As part of this priority, we are taking immediate and affirmative steps to improve early and more frequent engagement with underserved communities who for far too long have been overburdened by pollution. To end these injustices, we can look to the wisdom of indigenous peoples in North America who are deeply connected to their natural surroundings and have long advanced nature-based solutions to thrive in a changing climate. Nature-based solutions not only provide a powerful defense against climate change, but they also support our mission to advance equity, improve public health and the environment, and build resilient infrastructure that addresses the needs of all communities. In the United States, we are taking a whole of government approach to conserve at least 30% of our land and waters by 2030. We are doing so by working closely with indigenous communities and local stakeholders, including farmers and ranchers who are stewards of much of this land. We are committed to working with all of our partners here at home and international organizations to ensure a future where all stakeholder voices are heard in the decisions and the actions we take together. Thank you so much.
Es un honor representar hoy a la provincia de Misiones. Tenemos el orgullo de recibir esta invitación y poder dar unas palabras en representación de todo su pueblo. En primer lugar, quiero agradecer a ONU Ambiente, muy especialmente a Jamie o a Jameson Ervin de UNDP, quien nos ha hecho extensiva esta invitación. Hoy vamos a presentar la experiencia de Misiones como un caso de éxito. Misiones es reconocida como líder ambiental gracias a sus acciones climáticas positivas. Nuestra provincia se encuentra al noreste de Argentina, limita con Brasil y con Paraguay. El 92% de las fronteras de Misiones son internacionales, dato clave para comprender nuestras políticas de conservación. Actualmente custodiamos el mayor remanente de bosque atlántico, Atlantic Forest, un bioma que llegó a ser el segundo pulmón verde más extenso de Sudamérica y solo comparable al Amazonas. Hace 100 años, Argentina era el país con el menor porcentaje de bosque atlántico. Hoy, 100 años después, esa ecuación se invirtió gracias al enorme esfuerzo del pueblo misionero que entiende la importancia del cuidado y lo refleja a través de sus políticas de Estado. Misiones produce servicios ecosistémicos que benefician al mundo. Un ejemplo concreto es la decisión de conservar grandes extensiones de selva nativa, acción que impactó directamente en el aumento de los jaguares. El yaguareté, nuestro rey de la selva, el jaguar, es una especie icónica de toda América Latina. En el territorio de Misiones, a partir de sus claras políticas de Estado, su población se ha triplicado. Según registros internacionales como la WWF, para el 2003 existían 40 ejemplares. Hoy, 18 años después, se contabilizaron más de 120 ejemplares de jaguar en total libertad. La selva misionera produce una gran cantidad y variedad de servicios ecosistémicos que benefician al planeta, y esta es nuestra proeza. Es decir, esta gran provincia que ocupa menos del 2% del territorio argentino conserva el 52% de la biodiversidad de todo el país. Fue el mismo Papa Francisco con quien conversamos sobre la crisis climática mundial y compartimos la necesidad de dar una respuesta integral y de dar una respuesta holística a esta temática. Luego pudimos expandir nuestro trabajo y Misiones asumió la presidencia de Ambiente y Cambio Climático de la Cicosur, que es una zona de integración regional que la componemos 71 estados subnacionales, o sea, 71 provincias de 7 países de América del Sur. Es que nuestro entender en lo que acción climática refiere son los gobiernos los verdaderos agentes de cambio, los estados subnacionales, los municipios. Es por todo esto que esperamos con gran entusiasmo que las próximas próximas cumbres de Naciones Unidas se evalúe el posicionamiento y alcance el rol de los estados subnacionales y el abordaje integral de la acción climática. Asimismo, es fundamental direccionar los mecanismos financieros internacionales para poder seguir conservando y para poder seguir protegiendo, en nuestro caso, el bosque atlántico o, como nosotros le decimos, la selva misionera. No puedo despedirme sin antes invitarlos a que conozcan nuestra provincia, su gente cálida y las famosas cataratas del Iguazú. Gracias por su tiempo y su atención. Es un gran honor para mí poder participar hoy en nombre del pueblo de la provincia de Misiones. Muchas gracias.
It's a great pleasure to join the Nature for Life Hub today at this important forum and very important time in our history. The three concurrent crises of climate change, biodiversity loss and a global pandemic also provide us with an opportunity, and this opportunity is great in cities. Urbanisation's been a big contributor to biodiversity loss, and we've built cities in the past by locking out nature. But as more of the world's population moves to cities, their huge people power and resources means that it's cities which can drive innovation and develop in ways which are nature positive. And the good news is that nature positive cities are resilient cities. For cities and their subnational governments, with their close connections to their communities and their responsibility for land use and local infrastructure and transport, for stormwater, for waste, for public health, open space and so much more, nature positive development will be integral to the health and well-being of their citizens. Investment in nature positive development, then, is an investment in public health. An investment in building resilience in cities with their limited resources makes financial sense. So how do cities do this when a nature positive city means more than just protecting the nature that's already there, but enhancing nature actively in our cities? It means putting nature at the heart of sustainable development planning. So in building, construction, infrastructure and transport, it means designing in nature positivity, such as planning regulations which require zero carbon buildings, buildings which use nature for their heating and cooling, which produce their own renewable energy, which contribute excess to the grid or their neighbours through community batteries. They process their own stormwater, they create green space and permeable surfaces. In my city of Melbourne, 29 local governments have got together to try and mandate this, to provide clarity and certainty to developers and drive significant change in the building industry in our city of 5 million people and growing. It also means reallocating road space to make room for greening and active transport, to incentivise walking and cycling because it's safer, it's quicker, it's more affordable and it's more enjoyable. It's great for health, great for social connection, excellent for local economies, and it builds resilience. It means using all the tools available in a city to drive a circular economy and eliminate waste, and using a city's procurement policies to influence supply chains, to incentivise sustainable practices and send strong messages to markets about the value of nature-positive development. On urban fringes, it means retaining, enhancing and restoring land for habitat, nature and water. Like the regional city in Queensland, where there's some of the highest land clearing rates in the world, they're providing financial incentives and support to landowners in strategic locations to not only retain and protect vegetation, but to plant more and to monitor its impacts on wildlife, the water table and soil quality. So rather than locking it out, we're inviting nature back into cities. Equally, Cities with Nature platform helps cities to do just that. It offers best practices, case studies and resources online. It's a virtual place where cities can learn and inspire each other, taking action towards being a nature positive and resilient city, a city that redresses inequality and works with local and traditional communities in bringing nature back into our cities. Because there's no going back. We simply have to repair our damaged relationship with nature. And while our primary task right now is to build the resilience of our communities, the best way to do that is through nature positive development, aligned with climate action and reducing social inequality. Cities really are critical to building resilient communities and a nature-positive future. Thank you.
One of the most exciting emerging trends is the rise of youth as a powerful force for change. In this segment, we'll look at the ninth pathway, sparking change through youth voices. And let's not forget the need to have greater intergenerational dialogues in order to truly co-create the future that we want. In 2018, Greta Thunberg electrified the UN General Assembly and the World Economic Forum, speaking with uncompromising clarity and indisputable moral authority. She not only opened the door for herself to sit at the table of global discourse, but she opened the door for an army of young people ready to have their voices heard. Whether through organized networks such as the Global Biodiversity Youth Network, Fridays for the Future, and Extinction Rebellion, or through individual artists, dreamers, and activists, youth are leading the way in calling for a nature-positive future. Let's listen to some of these young voices.
Hello everyone, I am Nimesh Anuradha.
My name is Kevin Luzalo.
My name is Andrea. I'm Shweta Stotrabasham.
My name is John Lishabatis.
I am Zakir Hussain.
Hi, my name is Esteban Ramirez.
My name is Sudha.
Hi, my name is Pura Tolawala.
Hola, mi nombre es Rebeca y vivo en la Ciudad de México.
I'm from San Salvador, El Salvador.
From Kenya.
In the United States of America.
Occupation, Haiti.
From Sri Lanka.
Mexico.
Pennsylvania, USA.
Chennai, which is in India.
Pakistan. For the last few years, we have been facing unpredictable heavy rains.
Just this last month, we had rain worth 2 months in less than 1.5 days. Year by year, we are seeing that there is an increasement in the urban floods that affect thousands of people.
Chennai experienced one of the hottest summers this year, and last year we lived through a cyclone.
My country is currently facing drought-driven food insecurity that is threatening the lives of over 2.1 million Kenyans.
En este año hemos experimentado múltiples inundaciones y deslaves debido a las torrenciales lluvias y a la pérdida del suelo permeable debido a la urbanización.
We need our governments to step up and recognize the real impacts of climate change.
The governments are not doing enough. Our local and national authorities are not doing enough.
Government and industries are not doing enough.
The national decision-making on environment has ignored the concerns of the society, especially from indigenous and local communities about projects in natural areas. Also, the public budget for environment has been decreased year by year. Meanwhile, hundreds of defenders has been murdered.
One need to stop the biodiversity loss.
So let's stop the same in the world, and let's stop doing the same injustice, same deforestation, same degradation, same greed that we are seeing in the world, and let's transform our future.
The agricultural sector needs to stop the same.
Government and industries need to stop the same in our world. Stop the same perversive subsidies that harm our oceans and seas.
Let's work together.
Let's create a world that does not have inequity between and within generations. Let's ensure we uphold the rights of indigenous people and also the rights of nature.
Let's work together to realize a future that
my generation will be proud of.
A transformative future
where governments stop doing the same.
Necesitamos cambios transformativos para evitar la pérdida de la biodiversidad ahora.
We need to create transformative change and ensure equity between and within generations.
Let's raise your voice together to make a better place.
For me,
my generation,
for nature,
for life.
I'm Kinan and I come from the village of Sungai Utik. There, we still practice our tradition and live self-sustainably according to our customary law. The kids there still jumping from the trees in the river, picking fruits fresh from the trees. The elders still weaving traditional clothes. And there, we practice a ritual to close off the village so that even during the current pandemic, we can continue living the way we always have, eating rice from our own fields and water from our own river. But in other places, this is happening less and less due to the effects of modernization and outside influences coming to the small villages, taking their land, tainting their culture, and destroying the forests that they have taken care of for many hundreds of years. Through my work as a filmmaker and photographer, I dream to document the traditional culture, way of life, and local wisdom of my community so I can share it with other communities and the rest of the world. This is why we need a platform to show our culture and show how it can help with this pandemic and also the climate. My dream is for Sungai Utik to receive legal recognition from the government so it can continue what we have been doing without worry, and for indigenous people everywhere to be recognized as wisdom keepers and rightful owners of their customary territory for a sustainable future.
Next year will be the 50th anniversary of the first United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, the 1972 Stockholm Conference. And let's not forget that it'll also be the 50th anniversary of the Limits to Growth. Next year is also the 30th anniversary of the Rio Earth Summit, which gave us rise to the 3 Rio Conventions: the Convention on Biological Diversity, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the United Nations Convention to combat desertification. These 2 events marked a hopeful period in history where the world came together to take stock of our emerging environmental crisis and to chart a global response. If we are to emerge from our planetary emergency, we need to come together again in the same spirit and with the same resolve as we did during the Stockholm Conference and the Rio Earth Summit. We must look at the human problématique as we addressed it through the Limits to Growth. In the final pathway, restoring balance and inspiring hope, let's hear from global leaders who are helping us do just that. And let's remember, we don't have another 50 years.
Our planet is in a state of emergency, a climate crisis bringing an increasing number of storms, floods, wildfires, and droughts, a biodiversity crisis with an accelerating extinction of species, raising sharp questions about how our livelihoods depend on our relationship with nature, an environmental crisis destroying the ecosystem services that we are dependent on. Together, we need to seize every opportunity to make peace with nature, recognizing that we are, in fact, part of nature. COP15 and COP26 need to bring the transformative change necessary to set us on path to a sustainable future. As we build forward, we must build greener. We need an urgent transition to fossil-free economies. We need ambitious recovery programs that lift the disadvantages that set us on track to a redefined relationship with the biosphere. And we need to ensure global action. This is the time for more cooperation and more determination. Sweden's commitment to Agenda 2030, our prioritization of climate financing, and our new biodiversity initiative all come down to this. This is what guides our commitment to building back better and greener. Next year in June, the world will come together in Stockholm to commemorate the first UN conference on the human environment. And Stockholm Plus 50 provides a unique opportunity to link our most pressing environmental and development agendas together in the context of sustainable recovery. We invite you all to work with us to make this event a stepping stone for accelerating actions for a healthy and prosperous planet for all, leaving no one behind. Our next steps will define not only the future of our ocean, forests, grassland, and wetlands, but the future of our life on this planet.
For centuries, people have relied on nature for well-being and livelihoods. But in the last centuries, we have misused it with terrible results. Nearly 1 million species are at risk of extinction. Nearly 3/4 of the Earth's ice-free land has been transformed to meet human demands. If humans continue to emit greenhouse gases at current rates, global temperature will rise far higher than the Paris Agreement's targets within decades. Our future on this planet requires that we stop misusing nature and restore balance.
Humanity is dependent on the natural world. Humanity is also facing an existential challenge of its own making, involving climate change, land degradation, and biodiversity loss. Our climate is warming rapidly. In our lifetime, the North Pole may become ice-free in summer. We have transformed nearly 3/4 of the Earth's ice-free land to meet our demands for food, raw materials, and homes. We have polluted our oceans. We are causing catastrophic loss of biological diversity. From rainforests to coral reefs, ecosystems are being degraded and lost, and nearly 1 million species are at risk of extinction. It is humanity that is causing this: climate change, biodiversity loss, and desertification.
The world created powerful ways to restore balance when they agreed on the 3 Universal Conventions on climate change, biodiversity, and desertification at the Earth Summit in 1992. These treaties, along with their decisions and institutional frameworks, enable global, regional, national, and subnational action for sustainable development. Today, these conventions are joining forces through the global social media campaign Restoring Balance with Nature to show how seemingly unrelated actions can have an impact on the life support systems of our world.
We want to reduce global food waste, so you can still pour yourself a cup of good coffee. How are these related? The less food wasted, the more the land to grow coffee, and the healthier the soils. Restore environmental balance by lowering your food waste and supporting small farmers worldwide.
The campaign raises awareness and encourages people to reflect on the relationship between their everyday lives and impacts on ecosystems. It also seeks to encourage behavior change towards a more sustainable life.
It's a global emergency. Global emergencies recognize no borders, respect no ideologies, and are indifferent to political arguments. The pandemic has shown that we can only conquer such a crisis if political will is combined with collective action and sustained investment. We must act now, together, to change the direction, to reverse biodiversity loss, to keep global temperature increases below 1.5 degrees, to restore degraded land and make it green and productive. This year, we entered the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. Protecting and restoring nature will help drive a green recovery and prevent future pandemics. Investing in nature and the solutions it provides will allow us to build forward better, greener, healthier, stronger, more sustainably for all of us, leaving no one behind.
The Restoring Balance with Nature campaign is based on the notion that ecosystems are complex relationships. Each organism is dependent on the existence of others. The campaign shows how actions by people can support the 3 conventions, help restore balance with nature, and create a positive impact on our everyday lives.
Solar energy can be vastly scaled up in the Sahel, so kids can be kids and don't need to leave their homes. How are these related? Sustainable energies foster development and help prevent migration of rural populations to cities. Restore environmental balance by supporting the transition to clean energy.
The campaign is friendly, accessible, and intriguing. The issues address people directly. Messages are communicated in a positive way. The campaign's intriguing tone is inclusive and empowers people, opening doors to action.
We want to help restore the balance of soil,
climate, and biodiversity worldwide, so you will be better protected against pandemics. How are these related? Balanced ecosystems reduce the risk of zoonotic disease spread. Restore environmental balance by getting involved with local restoration and reforestation organizations. The United Nations Rio Conventions are coming together for a more balanced post-COVID world.
In 1992, the Rio Earth Summit recognized the coming storm. Our predecessors in Rio foresaw the daunting challenges ahead. The 3 Rio Conventions created then on biodiversity, on desertification, on climate, gave us the principles and the instruments to tackle these challenges. Today, these challenges are even more urgent. They are also closely linked. If we act on climate change, we can reverse biodiversity loss. If we reverse land degradation, we can lock atmospheric carbon away in the soil. That's why today, as leaders of the Rio Conventions, we are joining forces to ask each and every one of us to take action in our own environment.
By responding urgently to the climate change emergency, protecting nature, as well as protecting and restoring our land and biodiversity, we will reduce numerous future risks to ecosystems and humanity. It is up to everyone to take action.
To help change humanity's course.
To restore our balance with nature.
To ensure a butterfly effect when small individual changes can deliver large consequences. Let's make a difference.
And there you have it. It's time for us to chart a planetary response to our planetary emergency. These 10 pathways and the stories we've heard from around the world are reason for hope, inspiration, and resolve that we can do this together. Thanks for joining us for this virtual session. And please visit the Nature for Life Hub to learn more about what you can do to work toward a nature-positive future.